The problem with Michael Burry. Now, this guy, if you guys have seen the news as of late, has recently liquidated pretty much every single stock and position, put, call, hedge, everything that he's owned. Now, this guy, obviously, his claim to fame was the big short back in the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. Housing market collapsed, market fell down pretty bad, bear market for quite some time. However, since then, the market's, essentially gone, I don't want to say just straight up, because we've had its pullbacks along the way, but the market's been quite vertical since that time frame. And it provided an amazing dip opportunity for those that were involved and for those who maybe took advantage of that opportunity, right? Depending upon what you took advantage of, whether you bought a house, whether you bought stocks, whatever. You probably did pretty well if you were holding those positions still from that time and you haven't sold them. Here's the problem with perma-bears or individual figureheads in the investing community, the stock market space, whatever you want to call it. The problem that we have is that all of these people, right? What happens is their claim to fame generally comes on one-hit wonders, right? Cathy Wood is another example. Now, we'll talk about Cathy Wood in just one second, but I want to start with Michael Burry because the guy sold everything apparently, right? He's all out. He sold everything, right? Now, this guy is what we call, or what you can call, a perma-bear, and he thinks these bubbles are all going to collapse. Now, they definitely will, and they can, and at some point, the music is going to stop, and we all need to understand that, right, in all reality, okay? The problem is that when you're trying to be a perma-bear and trying to time this entirety or this massive backside that you see coming, you're fighting the stock market, which has historically been up, right? So you're fighting a trend in the big picture that's already against you, which is number one. And that's already a tough battle. You can do it, and the guy's done it. But since then, and if you were to just go off of his hunches and his warnings and all these things, the guy's been so wrong since in terms of his big warnings, not necessarily his portfolio investments and all that stuff all the time, right? But you see what I'm saying? So when it comes down to it, if you put your money where your mouth is at the end of the day, and he, to be honest, did and didn't. He had a pretty big Apple put position, but that was obviously that when Apple went straight up off the lows of June. So that obviously, was a pretty big hit to him. And yeah, sure, for whatever. But at the end of the day, these one-hit wonders or these perma-bears, the problem is that long-term, that's not a consistent strategy. You've seen it. You've probably heard it. Great. Now, getting on to Cathy Wood, because I do want to talk about this too really quick, because no one talks about this really at all. The problem with Cathy Wood is everyone looks at Cathy Wood now and says, well, Cathy Wood sucks. Like, her returns are ass. Like, her returns, she had a great time and then she's back down to pre-pandemic levels. Like, why would you buy this ETF? Yes. Now, she did extremely well during a very strong period in the market. And if she did a couple things different, I'm sure she looks back and thinks similarly, but at the same time, she'll come on and say the same things. We believe in innovation. We believe in growth and this and this and this. And we believe that these things will be what gets us out of this recession and this and that and bear markets and all that stuff. And great, sure, maybe she's right. We'll see what her 5-year time horizon is. Because to be honest, for everyone who's been following Cathy Wood, hasn't even been around following her for 5 years at this point in time, right? But the problem with Cathy Wood is that if her ARK Innovation ETF, let's just say, didn't make the incredible run that it did during the recent push off the pandemic lows, where it hit up to 159.70 roughly, and then it fell right back off down to sub $40. If her ETF, let's say, went up to, let's say, like $120 or even like $100 to $120 in that span of time, and then fell from that 120 back to, let's say, like 75, instead of going to 159 and then falling back to 35, if that was what happened, there'd be a lot more respect for someone like Cathy Wood in the space, right? And I think there's a lot of lessons that you could take away from her and from Mr. Burry. Because while different, one a perma-bear and one seemingly a perma-bull, at least for her innovation stocks and companies and whatever, revolution, if you want to call it that. You have almost two ends of the spectrum, and a blend in between, like quite literally a blend in between, is like where you want to be in terms of your longer term investing portfolio. A blend of Michael Burry and a blend of Cathy Wood, someone who, let's say, identifies like, oh shit, like I'm up a ton right now. It might not be a bad idea to lock some more in and to potentially hedge by backside here, right? And also someone like a Michael Burry who at some point says, you know what? I do think we could see this big short again. The bubbles are going to burst and they're going to pop. But I understand that I am fighting a longer term, bigger picture trend to the upside that who knows how long this can keep inflating and inflating and inflating despite some of the air coming out during some of these pullbacks and corrections in the pandemic. But it seems like that air just gets pumped right back in each and every time. So I think taking a step back and understanding the relative scale of what's going on in both scenarios is actually an amazing blend in between. And it's not like a perfect solution of like, okay, just do this, because there isn't an answer of, oh, just do this all the time. Because sometimes you have to take profits, sometimes you got to cut a loss, and sometimes you got to hedge. There's no, oh, perfect, let's just do this every single time. And not to get too deep, not to get too technical here, but that's where I think there's a ton of value in relative sentiment. So when it comes down to it, we've seen this play out just tremendously over the past like 2-3 years now, not even, honestly, more so specifically the past like year, 6 months, 8 months. When we have a ton of bears in the market that are all expecting the bubble to burst, does the bubble tend to burst? No, it tends to not burst when everyone's expecting it. Okay? I recently saw a stat that, new home buyers or those who don't have a home right now are looking for the market to crash, as they say, and then they'd be interested in buying a home. We talk about this on a stream. Guys, when that is the sentiment, that's great. Awesome. I'm happy for you that you're going to have money set aside to buy a home when the time comes. The problem is when the true time comes to buy a house that you're going to want to be, okay, like this is like a rock bottom investment opportunity, market crashes, all that stuff. The problem is that you're not going to have a job. Like that's the problem. And so you might feel good now because you got a job, but in X months, years, whatever, when that time comes, the problem is that you're not going to want to buy a house. Either you're not going to be able to afford it, you're going to be scared shitless, or you're straight up not going to get approved because you don't have a freaking job. Like that's the ultimate problem when it comes down to it, right? And no one understands that or realizes it until it's too late, until it happens. And then just things go back on and things, will occur like usual. We'll have these ups and downs, and it is what it is. But having a feel for that relative sentiment in the markets, social media is a great place. The fear and greed index, like we always talk about, is a good place just to get a feel. Right? And then on top of that, we take it a step further and we talk about pain and understanding where the painful trade is, right? Where is it pain? Like who is experiencing the most pain right now? Longs, shorts, right? Those who are long commodities, oil bulls, like treasury bulls. Like there are different sectors all over all the time, different markets that we see pain. And using these indicators to understand who is feeling the most pain, who is throwing up their hands, waving that white flag. And that is when that white flag goes up, that is where we can seek opportunity. And again, the shorts, when Cathy Wood was at the top, at the peak, the shorts were getting squeezed left and right. You had AMC, you had gains, you had nutty moves. But looking back, obviously, that's hindsight, but now you have this data to understand and apply to something in the future. It's not going to come back to you on a silver platter the exact same way, but there will be similarities. And when that happens in the future, guess what? You now have this experience to say, okay, time to hedge, take profits, go short. That's what you want to do. When you have everyone and their mother saying, the end is near, all the bubbles are going to pop, Michael Burry out here, that type of person, and we're at lows, S&P's at lows, and we get down to points where it's like, oh my gosh, we're never going to bounce. That has been the time to say, okay, it's time to start considering going long. If I've been short, hedging with some calls, hedging with some long positions, maybe taking profits on some of my shorts, locking some gains in here, because at this point, I'm now in the crowded trade. Right? As much as if I'm riding a move down, as much as the longs have been hurting, right? They're waving their white flag. When they wave that flag, when they're getting close to that point, and when they start doing it, and we start seeing the floor dropping out, people are, capitulation moves, all that crazy stuff, that's the time to start saying, wait a second. It's time to start thinking about the reversal because that's going to come when the longs least expect it. Same on the short side. That's the biggest takeaway that I think people don't take away from these people is that they're not using them properly. They're not using the Burrys, the Cathie Woods, the Ackmans. They're not using these people as sentiment indicators, right? They're not using them as guides to what they're seeing, interpreting that, and then applying it to what we have seen in the past and what you can expect in the future. No one has any freaking clue what's going to happen tomorrow. But there are clues and there are hints and there is history that we can play off of that can guide us for the future. Hope that was helpful. With that said, thanks so much for watching. Consider subscribing to the channel here. Hit that thumbs up button and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.